Welcome to Seminar Sunday, District 21's weekly episodic webinar series. This week we're talking about goal setting and planning, how this can support you in your personal and professional development, as well as, of course, the success of your club. It's a great honor to be here today. My name is Michael Bound, Program Quality Director for District 21 Toastmasters. And through the course of the next little while, we will discuss the topic of goal setting. Now, this is a weekly webinar series that we'll be wrapping up next week, June 30th, with the final Seminar Sunday in the series, 1 year left. Are you on path for your Distinguished Toastmaster Award? Great for those folks that are trying to wrap up the Distinguished Toastmaster Award in the traditional program and perhaps just need some ideas or inspiration on steps that they may need to take in order to achieve that final milestone. Be a lot of fun, but of course, this session is also going to be a lot of fun, so it's great to have you tuning in to watch this. We're going to cover off a couple of topics, and for the most part, a lot of these will be relatively straightforward, but I'll definitely make sure to take some time where perhaps I suspect will be more value to you, and hope that if you have any questions after watching this webinar, you're more than welcome to contact me, and I'd be happy to support you along the process. Identify what are our goals and plans, how we go about doing a club success plan, and goals you are planning towards when leading your club. So of course, that is more focused on specifically club leadership, but planning is one of those beautiful things that we can learn through Toastmasters. And of course, we also learn that in doing club success planning, for example. That's a great way of strategic planning where your club is going to be in 6-12 months from that date when you do that plan. So I think the first thing we need to make sure we understand is, what is a goal? Before we can talk about planning, we need to cover off information about goals. Goals are a specific objective you and your team must achieve. So it could be that let's say you're representing an organization that has some offices all across BC. Perhaps your goal is that you want to move into Alberta, or perhaps you want to move all the way across Canada or North America. Whatever the goal happens to be, it's a specific objective you and your team must achieve. Simple as that. It doesn't matter what it's in regards to. It could be specific about your club, but in that example I just used, of course, it's more of an organizational goal. It's the same thing in Toastmasters. Perhaps your goal is to have 20 members. And it doesn't necessarily matter whether your club currently has 20 and the goal is to maintain that, or whether you have 8 and you want to climb to 20. In either case, that is a goal that is specifically something that you wish to achieve. So the great thing about goals is they can be SMART: specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-bound. Absolutely, the root of all goals should be SMART. If they are not, then it's not really a goal. If you think about, for example, a goal that is not time-bound. Going back to that last example, our club is going to have 20 members, especially if the club currently has 20 members, and that becomes a very challenging goal to understand. But in any case, our club is going to have 20 members. Could be today, could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years from now. That is not a goal then, because you don't really know what you're working towards and in what time frame. Likewise, taking that same example, measurable. This is a relatively straightforward for example, again, using that 20 members piece, because if you, in that case, you have a number. But if you just said, our club is going to have members, well, that's not specific, measurable. It's not really action-oriented, even for that matter. Probably very realistic, but not time-bound at all. So a club having members is not necessarily going to be a goal either, because if you're not meeting that goal, well, then you're not a club at all if you have 0 members. So those are important things to consider when you are creating a goal. Is it specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-bound? To implement a goal, you need to think about a couple things. First of all, involving the team. And the reason you'll want to involve the team, of course, is, sorry, skip back here. There we go. The reason you'll want to involve team members is because that creates buy-in. The goal is not just your goal, it is the team's goal. And that, once again, applies no matter where that is, whether that's in your club, in an organization that you're part of, anywhere that you want to have goals set. Even if you're sitting down with a spouse or partner, for example, and you're like, hey, we want to save up X amount of dollars and invest in XYZ. Same thing. You need to involve them in the discussion, or it's not really going to be an effective goal. You want to write down goals and write the details that you've decided on attached to those goals. Going back to that whole specific piece, it's easy to miss important details if you either don't write it down at all, or you write it in a way that it is really point form, hard to understand. You're going to forget. Much better to write it down, capture all the details that you can. Once it's on paper, it's there and you can work towards it. Consider the actions you'll need to take to achieve it. A good example, going back to that goal of 20 members, is if you have 15 seats in your meeting room, to get to 20 members, which of course doesn't necessarily mean you'll have 20 members show up to a meeting, but it's very probable from time to time you will have more than 15 people in attendance, especially a combination of members and guests. If you've got some sort of special event going on, very, very probable that you're going to need more than 15 seats. So looking at the dynamics of your meeting space, looking at possible other meeting spaces. One of the things that I was privy to as program quality director was attending a great session with past international president Pat Johnson. And she talked a little bit about our North American culture of taking tables out and having them set up in our meeting spaces. It's not necessarily an issue unless you're in a small meeting room. If you're in a small meeting room, it can become a big barrier. So what about, as a club, investing into some clipboards? You could go down to a dollar store, for example, and get a handful of clipboards for $10 or $20, enough that you could pass them out in your meetings for those that do need to write down notes or evaluations or whatever it happens to be, and they'll be able to utilize that. So it's definitely something to consider. Is that an action that we need to take? Go and get some clipboards, remove the tables, and now the barriers are gone. We can fill up the room with 25 people, for example. And then finally, one of the things we like to do when it comes to creating goals is we like to set them and then forget them. That doesn't necessarily work. You need to regularly review progress. In fact, you could start at what the end game is and then figure out where you need to be at specific points. So, for example, by June 1st, I need to have 17 members. I need to have 18 members. However many it happens to be, if by June 30th, your goal is to have 20 members. That way, it continues to be an attainable goal that you can work towards and monitor how you're going along the way, rather than realizing on June 29th that, oh goodness me, I forgot that we need to get all this much distance. So great things to think about. Now, on the other hand of goals is plan. A plan is the blueprint for achieving these goals. So a plan is laying it out, what exactly the steps you will take to get to that goal. Much like I'm talking about how you need to have that blueprint of where you need to be, again, on June 1st, in order to get to whatever goal you have by June 30th, where you need to be by December 31st in order to achieve that goal, etc. It goes on and on and on. You could really go back to the start right through the end, no matter whether it's a week-long plan you have, or whether it's a year-long, 10-year-long, whatever it happens to be. You need to be able to go back and say, this is where we're going to be at certain points in it. Much like when there's a construction project happening somewhere, they're certainly going to have a plan. All right, this project's going to take us 2 years. After 6 months, we'll be here. After a year, we'll be here, etc. Although they'll probably fall behind schedule, at least they have some sort of plan. And with a really good plan, that won't happen. So planning does a couple things. It, of course, reinforces our goals. It helps us do that reality check, whether or not they are realistic, especially. You'll determine that through the planning process. If, for example, your club wants to have 20 members in 3 weeks' time, and you currently have 8 and no plan in place yet, guests haven't been coming for a while, you've got some other situations you need to deal with, sure, you could start planning how you're going to get there, but you will likely realize relatively quickly that this may not actually work. It may not be suitable to get to 20 members in 3 weeks. We need to reevaluate it. Maybe it's going to take us, X amount of months, for example. That is the reality check portion of it. Really is, how obtainable are these goals? How realistic are they? Can we make adjustments? They make the leaders more future oriented as well. So what that means is they will support you in thinking about where you're going, how you're going to get there. And quite often as leaders, then once you understand where you're going, you can start to transition yourself before the other folks in the team. That way, you're ready for any obstacles that they come across along the way. Quite often, that's something that I personally do in my workplace is I think about, okay, this is where we're going in a year, 2 years, however long it's going to be. We need to get my team set up to head in that direction, even though perhaps the tools or the methodology that we're using in 2 years may not be available to us right now. But certainly in places we can align, it makes that change down the road less. So let's change now in this way, and then in 2 years we'll just finish the process. But it'll be easy at that point because we've already come 90% of the way in terms of our thought process and what we're doing. It's just a change to the system, for example. It, of course, talks about enabling leaders here to coordinate decisions. So that's absolutely a good way to keep discussions about who's responsible for what, how they're going to get it done. You can really come up with a good detailed plan if you sit down a table full of leaders to say, this is what we want to accomplish. And of course, finally, ensures efficient use of resources because yes, the initial planning stage takes a fair amount of time, but then the delivery is actually not that bad because you know exactly who needs to do what at what point in the game in order to achieve your desired future. So the 5 steps to planning. There are, all of these, of course, are important. But of course, you want to think about what kind of strategies and timelines you're going to be working within. You're going to, then once you know, okay, this is what we're doing, this is when we need to do it, you're able to look around and say, okay, well, who's going to take on what? In district leadership, for example, I've had the great honor of working on district success plans a couple of years now. And as part of that, the responsibilities portion is quite often relatively self-explanatory. Okay, well, the responsibility for building new clubs, for example, falls squarely on the shoulders of the club growth director. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to put all the tasks on that person. You're just going to say this person's responsible, and then further break down the individual tasks. Maybe the club extension chair is responsible for this. Maybe the, club retention chair takes care of this aspect. Maybe there's some sort of different assistant helping with different strategies, and they can take care of each of those tasks. Always think about obstacles, though, as well. What could go wrong? Quite often, what could go wrong will go wrong. That's Murphy's Law. So absolutely something you want to consider is, what are the risks? Essentially, that's the easiest way to really look at it, is what are the risks of this activity that we're going to do? If you want to gain 20 members, and your room only holds 15, going back to that example, one of the risks is, well, maybe the place we rent our room from won't allow us to take down the tables. Well, that becomes a risk then. So what is plan B? What's plan C? I mean, it's amazing. I've watched some leaders that I learned to really admire over the years. And I must say that that is an area that always impresses me, that you go to them and say, yeah, the plan you just gave me, it's not going to work. And they're like, okay, well, here's plan B. And you're just blown away, because you're like, what are you talking about? Like, I thought that would have devastated you. But no, they know exactly where they're going next. And if I came back and said, B's not going to work either, they often have that C ready to go. So make sure you have that in mind as well when you're doing a plan. And then, unless you've chiseled it in rock, don't hesitate to modify the plan, to say, you know what, that's not working. I've often talked about, having strategic plans in, for example, the district for 5-year windows, but every year you would update it. Now, hopefully you wouldn't be completely throwing it out and starting new, because that's not an efficient task for anybody. But maybe, just maybe, you are updating for what's realistic. Let's say the goal was to get to 200 clubs in District 21 in 5 years. Okay, well, today maybe that sounds realistic. But if 3 years down the road, you're sitting at 10 more than you had the prior year, at the start of it, you may say, well, 200 is not really realistic anymore. We're going to go to, I don't know, let's say 180. Obviously, I'm just making these numbers up as examples, right? Things that you can do to adjust as you go along. Because the last thing you want to do is leave something there that is not attainable. It's not realistic. It's going to really get people thinking that, this is nothing I can get to. Like, what is the point? They're going to shut down, and the results will go down, of course, as a result. So just something to consider carefully. When we talk about goals and planning, again, this is a topic that covers everything, but I think a lot of vibrancy in clubs and Going back to what Pat Johnson's done for District 21, and I know she's doing for other districts as well, is talking about vibrant clubs. And when I think about vibrant clubs, I think, boy, you know, I've seen such amazing clubs out there that I've had the pleasure of visiting, and every club does things just a little differently. But I would never say that any club does things bad or wrong. Differently is definitely the way to call it. So how is your club vibrant? How is it serving its members? And how can you plan to make it even more vibrant? Or perhaps maybe the reason you're watching this is you suspect your club is not the most vibrant. So if that's the case, well, there's certainly lots of things we can do. And one of those things, of course, is making a plan. Love this Dwight Eisenhower quote: "Plans are nothing, planning is everything." So going back to that idea that, you know, if you make a plan, you can keep updating it. And that's the continuous cycle of planning, because your plan is going to go sideways more than likely in some way, shape, or form or another. And if you're ready and you continuously keep planning, then you're never set in stone and you're agile and ready to move as the waves hit. And it will impress the people around you and make you a better leader. This is the goal that you have as a club member every time you walk into your club. And if your club is not offering this, well, you really have to think about what you can do to make this possible. We provide a supportive and positive learning experience in which members are empowered to develop communication and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth. There's some very powerful messages in there. And that is our goal collectively in our clubs. Supportive, positive experience, empowered, self-confidence, personal growth. A lot of power words, but we don't get there without some sort of planning. So that's where we do our club success plan. Our club success plan is found in this manual, the Distinguished Club Program and Club Success Plan. It's a great little manual that I absolutely love working with, and hopefully you've had the great pleasure as well of working through. I'm just going to minimize this for a moment here, because what I want to do is actually pull up a copy, and I will share it here in just a moment. Make sure you get access to it. All right, here we are. Okay, so you should see the book now, manual. And why I wanted to pull this up, I'm just going to shrink it down a bit, is so you could actually see what it looks like. So in scrolling through it really quickly, of course, it's a glossary. It talks about the Distinguished Club Program a little bit, talks about the District Recognition Program, all of that. And then you get into the Club Success Plan. So if we skip down there, you'll see exactly what it looks like. So it starts off with things like your club number, and then the area here is all of your team, who's on your team, what your principles and values are, how you're going to meet, how you're going to communicate with each other, solve any issues that you come up with, supporting, recognition for your efforts, etc. So all of that is in the first section, and that is equally important really to all of your goals that you want to achieve. Again, the planning is critical. It's how you're going to meet your goals, but it goes beyond that in a sense that you have to know how you're going to work with one another. You have to know how you're going to communicate, how you're going to support each other. All of that in the end becomes relevant to the goals and how you achieve them. So that is equally weighted really in terms of the plan versus the actual deliverables in that plan. So we're going along further here. Now you start to look at, okay, how are we going to achieve distinguished recognition as a club? So that's a matter of recognizing how many members you need, how many goals you're going to get, and then actually making specific, measurable, uh, attainable, relevant, time-bound goals to achieve whatever it is you're trying to achieve in your club. It's distinguished recognition. You need, of course, the education award. So the plan you'll see here, education action plan. I'll go through different goals, how you're going to achieve them, the membership then, how you're going to achieve those, then the training, how you're going to make sure the officers attend training, strategies that you need to take, and then the administration goal. So all the goals are covered off in the manual. And then at the end, there's a section for signatures from all 7 officers, as well as any other club members that perhaps were involved or have taken on some sort of committee role for you. And that is showing that everybody is committed to that plan. So that is the district success plan, or sorry, rather the club success plan. And what is certainly a helpful tool, and I always encourage clubs to make one of these. And I know people look at it quite often as homework, or this is just another distraction. No, it's not a distraction. It's not extra work. It will make your life easier, because what you have here is your guide for how you're going to achieve every goal your club may have. Who's responsible, when, all the information that you need. And then the rest of the year becomes a conversation about, how is this plan coming along? Do we need to adjust plans? How are we looking in the bigger picture? Do we need to adjust plans? That continuous cycle of, and what's coming up, of course, as well. So, hey, we've just finished this. What do we need now to get this? So hopefully that makes sense to you. Just going to switch back here to our PowerPoint now. So that's a distinguished club program. The final thing I want to talk about, in the interest of keeping this seminar Sunday relatively short, is this. This is something our second Vice President, Margaret Page, calls documented changes in people, distinguished club program, DCP, however you want to remember what this is. This is absolutely the end goal of many clubs. And it is really the end goal of all the strongest clubs, because they have a culture of being distinguished year upon year upon year that cascades out to the point where they would rather fold than not be distinguished. And that is an incredible testament to the power of being distinguished and the culture that that creates within the club. How do you get there, though? Well, I thought I better include that just as a real kind of review towards the end of this, when you're thinking about planning, goals, and those types of topics, which I hope this webinar is helping you to kind of crunch and think about, hey, where do we need to go as a club, or where do I need to go professionally or personally, and sit down and maybe just think and make some notes. That's one thing that I know right now it's something I frankly need, is to be able to have some clear time where I can sit down and think for maybe a couple hours even, and just make notes and take those notes and translate them to goals, basically, and then go back to the team and say, hey, here's some things that I'd like to work on. What do you guys think? So that's something that I hope this can help you do. And again, I'm focused a lot on your club and those types of things, but if it is personal or professional, it's really the same logic that you want to apply to it. So here's the important things about the Distinguished Club program. Your club needs to have 20 members or a net growth of 5 new members. So that's not 5 new members through the year. That is, you must be an additional 5 beyond where you started the year on July 1st. So on July 1st, well, June 30th at midnight actually, but likely the same number. Let's say you have 14 members, you only need 19 then. If you had 15 though, or greater than 15, you need 20. If you had 50 members, you still only need 20. So 20 is always the magic number. If you get to 20, you're good for this no matter what. It's if you had 14 or fewer members at the start of the year, that's where you get away with having less than 20 members and qualifying for the program. So it's important to recognize that, because I've seen a lot of clubs get tripped up on that over the years, and it's so sad to see, because they come and they say, hey, why wasn't I distinguished? Well, this is why, because perhaps you were 1 member short, perhaps you're 2 members short. And if somebody makes you aware of that early on, then that's going to help you. And then it just becomes a matter of reaching goals. If you get 5 goals, you get distinguished. 7 goals, you get select distinguished, and 9 goals, you are presence distinguished. 6 of those goals are education based. Because we are in the 2-year transition period, this program year and next program year, you can choose from 6 out of 12 educational awards, both traditional program and pathways program. So regardless which program you are working on right now, those will count for the next 12 months and 2 weeks, where you can still submit any traditional awards. Then 4 new members is a goal, as is another 4 new members. The idea there, of course, is if you have 20 members, we lose about 40% of our members every year. Therefore, if you get 8 new members, you'll likely be at 20 again. And then the final 2 goals, one of them is for training, getting 4 officers a minimum from your club trained twice per year. And then the last one being administration, you have a club officer list submitted by June 30th, as well as submitting on-time dues renewals for one of the 2 renewals periods. That's having at least 3 members renewing and 8 members total paid for renewed as of the renewal period for April 1st or October 1st. So that is the Distinguished Club Program. If you have any questions about how the Distinguished Club Program works, about club success plans, or just goal setting or planning in general, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Always happy to help, and look forward to helping you achieve whatever goals you happen to have personally, professionally, in your Toastmasters life and for your club. So with that, I want to take this time to thank you for watching and joining in this webinar, and feel free to reach out anytime. My contact details are now on the screen, and hope you have a wonderful day.